Hi, I'm Matt Sitter, CEO of AFN. Very excited to have you all here today. For AFN, the thing that we think about is change is where opportunity happens. And the best way to access opportunity and change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. The events that we bring together, we're bringing in a subject matter expert to help us think more about certain things that we have to manage within our businesses. Today, we've got Stephanie Adamson King with us, a longtime friend of mine. She has uniquely positioned herself from the start of her career to get multiple sides of the equation in business. She's JD MBA, so she knew from the beginning, I want to have both sides of things. She's worked in law practices, prominent health and healthcare and tech companies, including Twitter, Gilead, Zynga, and a lot more. She's currently chief admin and legal officer and corporate secretary at Playco. So she's feeling a lot of the pain on all the sorts of things that we talk about from the legal interaction with business on a consistent basis. She recently started a series of articles titled The Honey Bear on her experiences, simplifying complex concepts and really making organizations work better. And today we're going to be talking about how you make sure that legal is your friend and supporter and a good part of the team as you're working through things. Stephanie, welcome. Super excited to have you here. And I'll turn it over to you for any opening thoughts.
Love it. Thank you, Matt. This is actually really fun. And I love talking to the business side because it is something that I have focused on in my career. I come at it as I want to be part of the team. I'm here to empower. Being in-house, I'm a stockholder too, so I want the business to succeed. So how do I balance the risk part of my role, identifying it, helping the business to think through it, and then partnering with the business to make decisions. Also with empowering the front lines in the business to do their jobs and be innovative and creative. I've gone smaller and smaller. So I'm earlier in the business evolution now. I'm at a company that's only 140-ish people, Series A. And so the risk profile is totally different from when I was at Twitter or Zynga or Gilead. So adjusting my mindset, which is really fun, actually, to be part of the business that early on. At the same time, my role is risk identification and partnering with the business to help them make good decisions around risk for where they are in the business evolution. And you and I, Matt, have talked about that. Businesses do evolve. They aren't static things. They're dynamic, organic. So that part of it is super fun. And I love partnering on that.
Cool. Well, maybe just to start, how would you characterize a typical business relationship with a legal team within companies?
Well, I think if you were looking at lots of sitcoms and other things, you would think they are the Department of No, the dream crushers. People avoid them at all costs because they think they will be blocked on whatever they're trying to do. And legal isn't often seen as a partner. So I have made my whole career trying to debunk that myth and show a different way of doing it, and also that we can be fun. So I think that is where a lot of people come from. There's a fear of engaging with legal because it will slow things down, whatever way that happens.
Why do you think they think it'll slow things down?
Well, I think part of it is true. Depending on what kind of lawyer and legal team you're working with. I think historically, legal has been a Department of No, taking their jobs very seriously, as identifying risk and actually reducing it. And then it's evolved, and maybe I'm very biased because I am in the tech space and at companies that are trying to push the envelope on a lot of things. So for me, it's shifted. The role of legal has needed to shift. But I do think part of it is just like there are different types of doctors for specialties. There are different types of lawyers with specialties and also different personalities of lawyers. You've got some who are fantastic litigators, win, right? Their goal is company. Then you have folks who are very risk averse, who want to protect the company. They see their role as protecting the company from risk.
Right.
And then you have, different lawyers who are, from my perspective, I want to enable the company so that the analogy I use, which I have not yet put on the honey bear, but will be one, is I see our role as we all want to go skydiving. I actually want to skydive too, but I want to make sure we I have checked with the business. Do you have your parachute? Was it packed well? Do you have your goggles? Do you kind of know where you want to land so we can be there to collect you at the end? Okay, now go jump,
Right.
But we want to jump.
So, in large part, our membership at AFN, they're leaders of companies. And when we think about the relationship that they should have, what do you think that their expectation should be of either in-house counsel or external? What should they be expecting from them, and what can they hold them accountable towards?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things. One, outside counsel in particular, I'll start there because they are different roles, outside counsel and inside counsel. Outside counsel, you will have your partner, your relationship partner, who is that senior person who can see all the things. They're usually specialized in one area. And picking that person for your business is important. Some businesses need a relationship partner who's really strong in a certain area like litigation or regulatory, depending on what area their company is in, or IP. Or maybe commercial, you're doing a lot of deals, or you may need a lawyer who's really strong on securities. So it's important for you as a business to also have an idea of what are the biggest business issues that have legal ramifications for you and finding that partner. But then you should expect they do have expertise. They are able to identify other people in the law firm who can help you with specific areas. They also should be able to tell you, I actually am not the best person for that, or we aren't the best person.
Okay.
Let me identify someone else to help you. They should be curious about your business and want to know about your industry. I often find it's really good to pick a lawyer who does have depth in your industry. Some folks will say, I don't want a lawyer who is representing my competitors or has represented my competitors in the past. That depends. I think if you have a lot of litigation, fair enough. But if you are commercial, you need a commercial attorney or commercial support. It's actually really helpful, or IP or product support. It's helpful if they have depth in the industry and have a benchmark of what other folks are doing. So that's how you can leverage your outside counsel. They can be very expensive. So if you can come to them with specific questions, that's helpful. But you also need to give them enough context so they can give you a good answer. Details actually matter with legal counsel. And I do find sometimes the business doesn't think they need to give as many details or context around the issue. And then they're like, I got bad legal advice. And it's a two-way street. It's a partnership. The lawyer needs enough context to be able to give appropriate legal advice for your situation.
Right. Well, when you're getting charged by the hour, I think some people are a little bit hesitant to go down.
Yeah. And what I would say is do ask for a startup discount if you're a small company, because oftentimes firms will give you like 5 or 10% discount, which isn't a ton, but it's something, right? It's something.
Right.
And if you have a really good relationship partner, like the onboarding part, they should write down some of their time for that. Yeah. So do ask and talk about it at the front end of, you're a startup, you're trying to get going. What is their billing philosophy around ramping? Because they are trying to get clients. So they should also be your partner in that. And they should understand that you don't, you aren't a money tree, especially at the start phase. Yeah. Right.
Well, you're probably not going to get a discount if you don't ask. So
yes, definitely
want recommendation there. Yeah.
Some firms too will have hubs that you can go to and get materials. They have trainings and sometimes even forms. I would be wary a little bit of forms sometimes because they can be used in the wrong way. At the same time, if you're a startup, you can probably get a long way with some forms if you have context around them.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe just one more question on external counsel. So I would say the big concern that you would have is, are they really aligned with what I'm trying to do as a business? Because the more business that they get, the better off that they're doing. Doesn't necessarily help me. How do you make sure that you can be aligned with them?
I think that's an excellent question. I would say, having been in-house, my mindset was never like, oh, I need to bill more hours for this. I was always terrified of billing too many hours to a client. Because my dad's an entrepreneur. I'm like very aware of how expensive I was, my hourly rates. But, there are some lawyers who may have a different mindset. And again, I think that goes to finding the right lawyer for you and how you are working with them, because I am a lawyer, so I have background in what I'm looking for. So when I'm picking outside counsel, that is something I look for. And I have fired outside counsel who I'm like, this is crazy. Also, if you do see your bills and you're thinking that seems like a lot, ask the partner. They will talk with you about it. And often if it's totally, out of line, they will write stuff down. So always ask.
So it's a conversation that would not be unexpected.
Correct. Yeah. And I think
should be reasonable.
Come at it as like, hey, I don't understand why this is so much. Can you help me understand? Versus like the client that's like, this is ludicrous, because you do want them to want to work on your stuff, because you will get bumped to the top of the queue if you're a client they like working with. Okay,
that's a good point, right? So it's not just how much they're getting from you; it's how much they like.
Yeah, a lot of them really like working on. That's why if you pick a outside counsel who has background in your space, they're there for a reason. They want to do that kind of work.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point.
Help align interests too.
So the other point that you made was that when you're going for an outside counsel, making sure that they're curious about your business, is there any kind of signals on questions that they might ask or things like that you're like, okay, that actually checks the box on that curiosity about my business?
Yeah, I think, we're not just, are you planning on IPOing? I mean, yes, that's relevant for a securities attorney, but I think the types of questions they ask about where you are in your evolution in your industry is really good. A way to find outside counsel is if you go to trade shows or trade conferences or summits, are there lawyers that are speaking there as guest speakers? Because those are folks that are seen as experts in the field and clearly are donating their time to come speak at conferences in the space. And so they are showing that they're interested in that area. So that's one way to check. And you can look online too of people who've posted blog posts. And when you read them, do they make sense to you as someone who's in the space from a business perspective?
Okay. So flipping towards, if you got inside counsel, ultimately, you report into the CEO, right? What should the CEO be expecting of you? How are they holding you accountable?
I think that it's an excellent question, because it is, what is your mindset as a CEO? Are you looking at legal as a rubber stamp, just like, I want some set of eyes to go through stuff and keep the paperwork moving, make sure we're registered in all the states with our business licenses and all of that? Or are you looking for a strategic partner to help you think through the strategy, help you manage the company? Because in-house counsel deals with HR. We partner with HR, we partner with finance, we partner with product, we partner with engineering. I'm talking about tech companies, of course, but if you're manufacturing, they'll partner with those teams because there are rules and regulations around all that, or risk. So what do you want in your legal partner? Because that's what you will get, because you will treat them that way. So for me, I want to be somewhere where I have a seat at the table and I'm seen as a strategic partner, and that I'm included in conversations early so I have context, because my philosophy is I can help the business better if that's the relationship I have with the business, versus being seen as the rubber stamp at the end. But I select companies that I work for that way too when I have conversations with the CEO. Yeah. I have other folks who ended up at companies where they're a few layers down. So they may report into the CFO or the COO, and they're a step away from the CEO. That sends a signal to the rest of the company that legal is kind of a rubber stamp. So when you're making that decision, do think about the signals it's sending to the rest of the company, because they will interact with legal that way.
Right. Yeah. Well, I make the point a lot with CEOs, hey, you're always on stage and everyone's interpreting everything. So unfortunate truth, but that's just the way it is.
Very true. Yeah.
So in a circumstance where, the relationship where you've been interpreted as Dr. No.
Yeah.
How have you flipped the script, and how would you like your partners on the other side to be able to help flip the script so it's not just you versus me, it's a we situation?
A we situation. It's also an excellent and challenging question if you are in a situation already where you've been seen as Dr. No. It is, as a lawyer, you should look at like, why is that? Is it the way it was set up, or is it how I'm responding? So I do try to think really hard when I get questions that are really challenging, or I'll throw one out. We had one where when I was in ad tech, and this isn't a big deal, but it was the business being creative, except it would create some challenges. So we were selling ads, and they wanted to exchange free ads for burgers from the burger place downstairs. And they thought this was a brilliant idea. They would get free lunch every day, and we would just give away ads, which were cheap, which yes and no, 70% of what we charged was actually cost to us. But so we explained, we didn't say no right away. We're like, let's chat with finance, because I don't think they want to put a line item in for like burgers for revenue recognition, right? So but it wasn't immediately no. It was like, but let's find a different way to work with this business. So that's often, it's like, how are you responding? Are you just coming out and being like, that is crazy town? No, absolutely not. Or are you explaining why it's a challenge to the business? Always explaining the why, always not saying no, but yes, we can if, or hey, that's a really novel question. Let me think about it. Here are the things off the top of my head, but I actually don't know, and I want to go look into it. And it's a very cool idea. Like a lot of times it's a cool idea. I also really critically try to understand why they're presenting that idea. What's the core behind it? Is it, hey, we need new revenue models, we can't rely on our old ones, or the business is getting competitive pressure and we need to find a way to differentiate our product? What is the business reason behind why they're proposing whatever they're proposing? So you don't come out as a no, you come out as a, hey, I'm trying to understand what problem you're trying to solve at the core, and how can I partner with you to do that, and even come up with other ideas, because I'm working with multiple parts of the business and maybe have insight that to connect you to someone else in the business who's solving something adjacent or similar. So really from looking inside, how are you showing up as a lawyer? Then from the business perspective, it's like, we need context. Context is everything. And for legal to be a partner to you, we need to understand where the business is. We need to understand the financial state, where we are with fundraising, if you're getting competitive pressure, if we're seeing like talent issues or whatever it is. For me, the more context I have about what's the state of the business, I can pull on that knowledge when I'm trying to provide counsel, and I can direct my team to say, hey, right now we're really focused on a game that's got traction, and we need to figure out how to monetize it. So when we get inbound requests, bump those to the top of the queue, because for the business, that's our top priority right now. And so then they know, and they have context for that, versus just like, oh, I have another request in the queue and it's number 16, versus like, oh no, I know we're all aligned. So helping us align with you on the business priorities, because they change and shift, and we don't know if nobody tells us.
Right. Well, so I mean, one of the things that I take away from what you're talking about is that if as a leader of your company and you're evaluating your legal counsel, if they're not asking you why on certain things, they're not doing their job. So that's actually a good signal. Not that you just tell them what you want to do and they run off and go do it, right? You want them to be able to ask that why there. You should be expecting that. And the degree to which you want to try and lessen the cycle time on something like that is how inclusive is it in that to begin with, right?
Yeah,
are you actually getting that context?
And if they are saying no out of the gate, that's something to push back on with them, of like, what would get us to yes? Like, what is the risk that is making you react with no, right?
Okay.
So you also understand it helps if you ask for the risk.
Right. Okay. So you should be pushing back as well if it's just flat out no without these questions.
Correct. My best partners do push back on me. It's a partnership. They don't just take my counsel and run with it. They it's a discussion of like, oh, what if we did this instead, or help me understand this, or hey, I'm seeing this in the space. A lot of other companies are doing it. Is there a reason why we have a different, I want to understand this better. So it is a discussion. I want people to ask questions because it also helps me understand their position better, and it helps them understand the risk calculations that I'm doing. And we change our minds. Both of us will change our minds, which is great. That's the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, one of the things that we talked about for feedback to legal counsel already, we talked about the billing aspect for external counsel. You should feel comfortable talking about that. If someone in the organization feels like they're dealing with a Dr. No from the legal team, how should they be delivering that feedback so that it can be understood to the legal team?
Yeah, I think initially always like, especially if you're the CEO or, C-suite and you're getting feedback of like legal's blocking, have that person, make sure that person has gone directly to whoever is in charge of your legal team and given feedback directly before you come in. Doesn't mean you can't, especially if you're hearing regular feedback because you may have a Dr. No. You may in your legal team have a Dr. No.
Okay.
Not a right fit for risk alignment or communication style for where your company is. But always make sure that person goes first, because often it will come down from the CEO, like, I heard you killed a deal, or I hear you're, and it's like, hey, can we have context on what happened? Right. And often it's always more complicated than that. So have to come from the person who's having the experience first. But then, yes, like if you are seeing themes, chat with your head of legal to understand why. And you may have a situation where it's not the right fit for your business, the legal approach.
Yeah. And so one of the things I'm taking away from what you're saying is like the peer relationship. So it's really important that they just not run to mom or dad who's in charge saying things like you should be able to give feedback directly to your legal peer. Absolutely. And be able to ask about that. Yeah. Okay.
And I think having them provide to the legal, when they're giving the feedback, here's the impact it's having on the business when you just say no. Like always that context.
Okay. Can you tell us about a time where you helped actually identify an opportunity in the business that expanded, how the folks who are thinking about revenue or things like that might have been thinking about the opportunity, their challenges?
Yeah, we've had a few. So there's one, I can go the Wayback Machine to Zynga, where we had a game, some of you may know it, it's Words with Friends, that we had purchased, and we were trying to find ways for people to connect through the game more easily. And one of the proposals was, hey, we want people to automatically connect with folks who are geographic, like they're geolocation wise close to somebody else. And of course, as a lawyer, all the risk flags went up of like, what if somebody is being stalked or that is disclosing where people's location is? And if you're in a building, we're just doing like the first 100 people. If you're in a building with thousands of people, you won't probably be surprised if you're at work. But if you're in an area that's not as densely populated, like how many of those people are playing Words with Friends? And then, it may show up of you shouldn't know that somebody is close to you geographically. So this was a challenge with the business because they wanted to ship this feature very quickly. They wanted no friction and that people were opted in. At the time, geolocation was flag, but it wasn't as big as it is now with all the articles everyone's read on the New York Times and Washington Post. But we were like, hey, it's a privacy issue. So we actually went into a room with whiteboards and brainstormed on how do we do this to make it an opt-in. So people had to select to be in it, but it was still, there was a reason they would want to opt in. So we did a toggle, and it was a one-click toggle, but we came up with language with the business that got across the point to the player, the consumer, but also enabled really low friction for people to opt into this feature. So that was one. Another one actually that I'm living through right now is, I don't know how many folks are familiar with OpenAI, but they just released artificial intelligence, their next generation chatbot called ChatGPT. This is technical, but it's a very cool, interesting, and also kind of scary thing. And so we are very engaged. I have product attorneys, but I am too. And like, oh, how do we leverage this in gaming? Like, what are cool ways to integrate it? And how do we balance the risk right now when in very early stage tech? So that one is one where we are early on and we're not saying, oh my God, this is scary. No, it's like, okay, cool. Like there's a cool new technology. How do we integrate it into our games?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and whether or not you're scared of it, it's coming. So
it's coming. Yeah.
You better figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
One of the things you said up front was you like to make sure that legal can be fun. Why do you think that's important?
Well, one, I want to like my job too. I spend a lot of time in that job. I have a saying, like, if we didn't laugh, we'd cry, because our job is fixing problems a lot of the time and trying to prevent them. So there is a fun way to look at things. And I do think it helps us be more approachable and less scary, particularly for junior folks or folks just starting out. Who are like, oh my gosh, if I flag a problem, is it going to show that I created a problem, or, I'm the problem, but I do need help. So how do we make ourselves accessible and approachable for the business? And I found that, being fun and having a sense of humor goes an incredibly long way with partnering up and down the ranks in the business. And I find out the most critical pieces of information, honestly, when we were in offices in the kitchen, or I joined the running team and I would just chat with people, and that built trust. It built trust. And so I can do my job better for the company when I am able to build those relationships. And that's how I run my teams. And we hire people who approach legal that way. And so far, I think it's working pretty well.
Good deal. All right. I got one more question for you. So a number of years ago, this is probably like between 5 and 8 years ago, you had talked about the use of Slack at a company that you were at, and then you were monitoring stuff around it and using it to think about things. Just tell us about like your relationship with Slack and why that was valuable to you.
It's a great question. So I was first made aware of Slack actually at Zynga, because I don't know how many folks know, but the folks behind Slack actually were a gaming company. And Slack was a pet project they did so they could communicate better internally. And it turned out and they were asking friends also in gaming, like, hey, check it out. What do you think? And they ended up pivoting because it was getting traction. So I first saw it at Zynga, and it was a couple people who put it together, and Zynga wanted to implement it maybe to be the internal chat function. And at that time, we were in a very competitive space. Zynga was public, and so we didn't actually go with Slack. However, fast forward to my next company, AdRoll, where I was the GC, and we had a technical CEO engineer, and he, about my first year in, said, hey, we're all moving to Slack. I've been testing it for the last 6 months. I think we need better communication amongst the company, and so we're launching it. And so at that point, I'm like, well, here we go. I'm going to embrace it. And we partnered with them and Slack got launched. And then a lot of lawyers are terrified of Slack for litigation reasons and other things, but we actually chose to embrace it. We set up an Ask Legal channel. It was voluntary to join, but we had like 95% of the company ended up joining that channel, and we would get questions through there. We set up bots so that people could put in requests into our Zendesk queue easily. We had FAQs that we could direct people to through Slack, and that helped us keep a pulse with inbound questions. Then I also used the tool with trigger words or flag words that Slack has. So I would join channels and I would stay out of the discussion unless I had a flag that there was a word like sued or violated or things like this. And then I'd go check out the chat, like, hey, what's going on in there? And then I could reach out to the business on the back end, like whoever was having the convo of like, hey, let's have a chat offline, or I could tag in one of my attorneys. but it was a tool that you could use instead of being scared by it, like embrace it and see how do you use it, because that's where the business is. That's where the business is talking. And it provided so much context for us to do our jobs better. And we were fun. Like we did bring fun. And so our channel was fun and people joined and they listened. And so it made it a lot easier for us to roll out things like policies and stuff like that, because we would do it through that channel where our business partners were.
Excellent. Okay, so we're about halfway past the hour right now, and we will shift towards allowing people to ask questions and interact more. But first of all, thanks, Stephanie, for all the conversation that you've brought to us, and helping me think about a couple things related to legal. And obviously, we don't have the problem 100% solved. I don't think we ever solve the problem in a half hour, but there's plenty of opportunity that's out there. And so, thanks a ton.